Hi, everyone. Welcome back to WellSpire's Navigating Special Needs Planning series. I'm Mike Delgass, an advisor at WellSpire, and today we're diving into a topic that's top of mind for many families, supporting school-aged children with special needs. From navigating IEPs to understanding how to advocate effectively within the school system, we're joined again by our trusted experts, Rich Yam and Heather Flanagan. So thanks very much, Rich and Heather, for joining. All right, Heather, I'll start with you. To start us off, can you explain what FAPE, what free and appropriate public education means in practice for families?
Sure. So FAPE is part of the federal law that ensures that individuals with disabilities are getting appropriate education. And it really kind of sets the stage for everything that you need to navigate around setting up those controls and those requests. So I think really at least for us, the center of getting an appropriate public education was the IEP. And that's something that you need to request the moment that you suspect that your child may need some additional services through the public school system.
So I think that's an important thing to emphasize, that this is really a right created under federal law. So children have that right to free and appropriate public education. It's not something you have to beg for. It's something you're owed. But Rich, Heather was referencing some of the early intervention and identification here, I think, when she was talking about FAPE. Can you help us understand, in that context of a child's right to free and appropriate public education, what is like child find, other early intervention steps? What does that look like?
Yeah, so according to that law that Heather was mentioning, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, which kind of setting forth that FAPE requirement, schools are supposed to kind of identify any students that they think might need services under any type of FAPE situation, any type of special education services. So for instance, in my situation, actually, when my daughter entered pre-3K, she's the only kid I'd ever known. So everything she did to me was like, that looks right. That looks appropriate. But
Yeah.
they had the sense, and obviously they had the experience and the exposure to a bunch of kids across all spectrum to understand, all right, maybe this was a child who could benefit from a special education service situation. So we actually went through the evaluation process ourselves, and I wouldn't have known to do that unless my pre-3K teacher or her pre-3K teacher actually brought that to my attention. So it was super helpful there. And so it's very important to understand that as parents, it's sometimes hard for us to gauge it. So we should rely on the pre-3K teachers or preschool teachers who have that experience to maybe identify those types of circumstances that might require a FAPE and special education situation.
Yeah, and I think in our situation, we were discouraged from, going into the kind of education track because, frankly, the school kept guiding us away from that, and we didn't truly understand what rights and other processes we would trigger if we had that determination. So if you don't understand, if you don't know that there's something coming back to you, that your child will get some really concrete steps as a result of a SPED determination, you might be like, I don't want the stigma.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you got to get past that.
Yes.
It isn't a stigma. In fact, it's something that really none of the other kids necessarily, if they're remaining in the school, will know about necessarily, but you do get something for it. And one of those things, Heather, I think you referenced already, one of those things you get for it is that IEP. Can you what does IEP stand for? What does it mean? What do you get? What's that process look like?
Sure. So it's an individual education program, and it is initiated by whomever. I mean, it could be the teacher or the school system, but it can be the parent as well. You can formally request that your child get an IEP. And your local, whether or not your student is in the local public school system, they will be the ones that are kind of driving that process. So you have to become friends with all of the people in the administration. And during my daughter's life, we lived in 3 different states. And so when we were moving, one of the first places where we went to outreach was the local school district, and tried to find the person that was either heading the department or the only person in the department that was dealing with special needs. And you start to connect with at least for us, that was a good connection to start that process and understand who the players were, what this new state was all about, where we could find resources, how we get things started. And so once you get that started, you sit down with the school district, you sit down with several representatives, you sit down with the school where your child is going to be getting education. And they have a lot of processes where they have to do a multitude of tests with your child, and they'll observe them and they'll do all sorts of things. They'll come to the IEP with a plan and some recommendations, but they are supposed to send that out to you ahead of time so that you can chime in on it. If your child is able, they should have the opportunity to chime in on that as well. And it's a very important meeting, and it's a very important document. It can be, in our case, like over 70 pages long each time, and it's done at least yearly, or it can be done upon other triggering events if you're changing schools or if something new has happened.
Right. And I think sometimes people get confused between a 504 plan and an individualized education plan. A 504 is a set of accommodations for people under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, whereas an IEP is a much more action-oriented and measured kind of plan where you have goals, then you have a plan for measuring, have we achieved those goals, and then a plan for what do we do if those goals aren't met, and that kind of thing. So there is a pretty wide gap there, and moving from 504 to IEP can really get your child quite a bit more in the way of services and have more clarity around how they're doing. So Rich, Heather mentioned the state specific issues here. And look, it's hard enough for parents to understand what their rights are. And now you layer on, oh, we're going to move to a different state. And what are the different rules there and the different processes? Like, there are people to help, right? There are advocates, there are attorneys. How do you decide whether you're going to use an advocate, whether you're going to use an attorney? When do you make that decision? What should we be thinking about there?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. I think I would always lean on, and this depends on different circumstances. For me, I think I'd lean on searching for that advocate first. So that advocate's going to have those connections to different special education attorneys should you need them in that IEP setting we were talking about, that Heather was talking about, in case there's any type of situation where there's a disagreement amongst school staff and amongst the parents as to what services should be warranted or aren't warranted. And that's where maybe special education attorneys would be helpful in that context. But starting off with the advocate probably makes more sense. They have that network of professionals that they work with, whether it be the special education agencies who might provide the itinerant teachers that your child might be benefiting from. That always seems like the appropriate place to start to build out that network and understand who all the resources that you have on hand, whether that's through the school system, the local school system, or whether that's through different special education agencies.
I think that's a really important point. The big takeaway there is that there is help, right? You can get advocates who can help you marshal all of these resources, some of which may be kind of normal looking legal support, but there are people you need to help do the evaluations. There are people who can help you consult with you about what school is right for your kid, because we haven't talked too much about outplacement here, but sometimes that public school setting needs to be replaced with a more targeted special needs school. That's still FAPE. You're still getting a free, appropriate public education. You're just getting it through a private school. The IEP still applies, all that kind of stuff. But there are a lot of resources out there to help, in addition to just support groups of other parents and that kind of stuff, and people like us, advisors, who can help navigate the financial issues and also help you kind of access those resources as well. So look, this has been really helpful. Heather, Rich, thank you very much for sharing your insights and the practical advice that our clients really need. I know from personal experience that getting through the school years with a kid with special needs can feel really overwhelming. But again, there is help out there, and you can navigate this with confidence once you assemble the right team. So I hope all the listeners here, the people watching, found this helpful. There are other videos in this series. Please check this out. In particular, in the special education context, we do webinars with charitable partners like the Special Education Legal Fund, and really dive into this in more depth.